So in this episode, I thought I would just grab a cup of tea and talk about the real user needs. And when I say real user needs, is what separates that, I guess, app design mentality from user experience or experience design mentality. It's almost like two different beasts or two different ways to look at things. One is very specific, another one is very holistic. And this is what we really want as user experience designers or, researchers, product designers. You want to be as holistic as possible so that you look at things very broadly before jumping into the depth of it and defining the detail. And I think Henry Ford's quote on his Ford engines and machinery and, manufacturing cars summarizes pretty well that if he would ask of what people actually wanted, they would just respond with, let's say, faster horses, and covering it with wants and desires instead of what actually they need, what's feasible, what's realistic and pragmatic enough to innovate gradually. And of course, it might sound grander than it really is because that machinery development lasted years and decades before it was at that feasible state where you could roll out and actually solve problems and make it affordable as well. It's akin of what, let's say, Elon Musk is doing right now with space travel. Or even EVs and the things of that nature. It's really just scratching the surface because most people are not going to be able to afford, and probably for our next 2 or 3 generations, nobody's going to be able to afford until we reach the tipping point where it's cheap enough to produce those experiences and therefore people can opt in, from customer experience perspective and as well as product or UX experience. And another take on it, I guess, is looking at it from a business perspective, because the wants are very expensive, they're very unrealistic, they're very idealistic, they're very long-term vision focused. That's where you want to get to. Realistically, the first step to take to get to that, and almost like a step to climb up and over time develop, is going to be the needs still. Because again, from design thinking perspective, from meaningful innovation perspective, you would want to take that Venn diagram of desirability, viability, feasibility, meaning what's actually going to generate cash and is cost effective from business perspective, what's engineering wise or technology wise or solutioning wise, even if there's maybe no engineering, maybe you're just going to make your own no code solution or a website or a printout or just a spoken service. What can you actually achieve? What skill sets do you have? Things of that nature, like what's the cost of it again? And the last bit is that desirability, which captures a lot of that want, but want should come after the needs are addressed. It could be version 2, version 3, maybe it's later on. And a lot of designers kind of get stuck. They get into that thinking pattern, which is not really realistic, or it's not going to aid their growth in the end, or maybe even get that opportunity they seek, is that they jump into the cool, the trendy, the something which is wants and flying cars. And this is a successful product like, let's say, Uber for taxi services. And Uber itself has a very long history, and there's a lot of, pivots and a lot of developments you could read up. There's a lot of good books on that. But people didn't really need an app to do that. They might have wanted it to, let's say, have some sort of applet or a website where we can quickly order a taxi instead of calling up or raising their hand physically on a street and saying taxi. There was obviously a need for a reliability flow. There was a need of flexibility, transparency, knowing how much you're going to be charged, trust of the actual service and person who's going to be driving you. That audit trail and an actual service quality of sorts is actually what mattered. This is what people really need. How it's expressed, again, should have been done with very feasible, very convenient to the users, very viable from business perspective, so that it's generating revenue. It's not just kind of burning cash, or it doesn't take you 5 years or 10 years to actually bring it to the market. There's a lot of considerations, but you as a UX designer should be part of that. UX takes quite a big chunk of those decisions, and the needs is where the gold is, even from user research perspective. When you engage with the people, you always need to look behind the lines. You need to read into it, because they're going to tell you one thing, but that's just going to be attitudes. It's what people say. What you really would want to capture is their behaviors, or what they actually do in day-to-days and why they do it, what their decisions are like. This is the depth as a UX designer, where you need to dig deep and understand all the different means what they're using, all the different touch points of interaction, and why exactly what's happening, where are the biggest pain points, and then build their opportunities on top of that. And your hypothesis could have been, of course, again, as in many videos I described, an app. But an app is just a vessel, is just a channel to carry on that value. So let's say if a person would need someone, I don't know, to renovate their house, let's say, or to mow their lawn or something like that, they're not going to be like, oh, I need an app for it. What we actually need is a way to get someone in really quickly, confirm and understand that they're a good fit, let's say, and they're trusted. And then you as a designer could scheme, and if your team come up with ways to do that, be an app, it could be a website, omnichannel experience, it could be maybe something like a service of sorts where people subscribe to it and you just revisit it constantly. So it could be very holistic. People don't really need the apps. Hey there, it's future me. And as I was editing, I realized that I kind of need to illustrate this case much better. Back in the day, I was advising this company which tried to compete with this massive TaskRabbit equivalent in UK called MyBuilder. And it's an app, a service where you can quickly jump into it, say, this is what I need done, let's say gardening or building something in a house, breaking a wall. We had a big enough sample of the actual users to understand what they do every day. How do we get the tradesman? And not surprisingly, one of the blind spots which we find out was that the actual people, the customers in UK, choose to use Google and default to that. We just go on Google and say, I need this plasterer within this Wycombe area. Find me the local tradesmen or local businesses. Show me the reviews, the star ratings. Can I send them an email? Can I use a contact form? Can I just call them up and quickly find out if they can give me a quote from what we know, or just schedule in an appointment somewhere later on? Instead of just competing with MyBuilder, now you also have to compete with Google, which is super ingrained. It answers that basic need to search and find a tradesman to do something for you. How would you compete with that? We had to resegment the market and look at the very specific needs, very specific tasks which customers need done, and within a specific vicinity, which is metropolitan areas. That then shaped and made the product very different. Instead of just an app which was big presumption competing with this giant and even bigger big tech giant. What's really important is to treat the needs of the user, to treat your needs as a designer instead of what you want or what's cool for the user or what, let's say, another designer did, so you want to replicate that and work on a something similar project or case study. Chances are they're not going to stick. It needs to be realistic enough. And then let's say I produce my challenges, which is the latest one, is about electric vehicles. And by 2030 in UK, all the new vehicles are going to have to be produced as electric vehicles. That's immediate need from the governance, from UK government perspective, but also that then trickles down to businesses. When it trickles down to the user or customer, they would maybe want a flying car, but you're never going to be able to deliver. Or maybe they would want like very affordable options of the vehicles. How would you actually bring it to the market and make it happen? And if you go with that notion that someone needed an app or sets of apps just to make it happen, I'm sure Uber makers back in the day had that notion, but they arrived over the years at something which is lasting, something sustainable, something that's governed. However, if you would start from scratch as a UX designer, not as a, let's say, just innovator or entrepreneur who's going to figure it out somewhat over the decades, you would need to address the needs, because the actual need here, or the actual need for those taxi users who want a better, more reliable, secure, convenient service, was really to get from point A to point B, again, securely, affordably, and things of that nature. That's the actual need, is to get from A to B. How you skin it, how you arrive at the solutions is up to you to make the user experience better. But that's where you would engage with the appropriate discovery and user research to understand what those specific users, where can you add most value? And I can guarantee that the next Ubers or Lyfts are going to be very different, because it's not going to be just apps. It's going to be probably apps plus something like maybe electric vehicle services or something along those lines, or maybe self-driving cars, because now Uber is so ingrained into the industry that it's going to persevere for years to come. It's almost like self-fulfilling Lindy effect, where every day they're in the market is another day more that they are going to be in the market in the long term. And unless they are innovating after the decade is gone, they might be challenged by something else, which maybe are going to address new generational needs or new developments within the different industry developing world, and all the different emerging tech trends, which I have videos on as well, which you should take a look, because it's appropriate and very important signals to consider, which are going to impact the needs. And let me just finish on this specific note that wants do matter. Wants is all about the attitudes toward new products, the engagement, the excitement, the desire to actually use something. But that can be generated by addressing the needs, those deeply rooted inefficiencies they might experience in their daily life, those pain points. You can spark excitement with the people using your new product or your new app because it's so flashy or someone else used in their lives. But if they don't have actual need in their day-to-days, again, the need has to be addressed first and foremost. That's my thoughts though. What about yours? Leave them down below. If you like this video, also smash that like button. That certainly helps. Subscribe too if you like these type of videos. And on that note, I'll see you next time.